We've spoken some about a wind down routine. Most people underappreciate the importance of a wind down routine. We often think that sleep is like a light bulb, that we dive into bed, we switch off the light bulb, and sleep should appear just as quickly. It's untrue. Sleep, in terms of a process, is much more physiologically like trying to land a plane. It just takes time to come down onto the terra firma of good sleep at night. Whatever it is you enjoy as a relaxation method, engage in it. Could be listening to a podcast, could be reading a book, maybe it's a meditation, it's light stretching. Whatever it is that you do, just build it into your regimen. You would never, be driving down the road and then pull into your garage at the same 40-mile-an-hour speed. You gradually decelerate and you come to a stop. It's the same thing with sleep. So you need to find some way to decelerate. The next tip is a little quirky and funny. Do not count sheep. There was a great study from my colleague, Dr. Alison Harvey at UC Berkeley, and she put this to the test. Didn't make people fall asleep faster. It made them take longer to fall asleep. However, she did find an alternative. If you are not into meditation or podcasts or sleep stories or whatever it is that you wish for, try taking yourself on a mental walk. And it has to be a walk that you know very well. So let's say that you walk your dog every day and you know there's a couple of walks that you take with your dog. Do it in hyper detail. So close your eyes, you go to the front door, you clip in the dog to the leash, you walk out, you go down the steps, out to the driveway, then you take a right, but you always cross over and you look to the left and the right because that's the place where traffic always comes. You cross over and now you're walking up and there's that strange sort of set of garbage that's been outside of that house for a long time and you don't know why it hasn't been cleared. And then you move. That type of high fidelity detail allows you to do what we said earlier, which is get your mind off itself. And when you do that, again, typically you fall asleep faster. And that's what she found. It was a great, great study. I really enjoyed that.
I'm curious as to why it works so well. And I'm not challenging that it works. I can imagine, having just closed my eyes and kind of imagine what that would be like. It's very pleasant. There might be, and here I'm just speculating, something about engaging one's procedural memory, because that's procedural memory. You're trying to remember how you do something as opposed to declarative memory, which is about facts. I remember this and this is going to happen tomorrow. I wonder whether or not there's something about using a procedural memory as opposed to a declarative memory visualization. Somebody should do that study.
They should, and I think it's certainly possible that when you're incorporating some aspects of the scene and the information is more sort of veridical and maybe sort of episodic declarative memory. But when you're taking yourself for a mental walk, what is the fundamental premise of that? It's a walk, it's motion, it's procedural memory. And so maybe it's something to do with being more attentive to becoming embodied, because when you're out walking and you're moving, it is a more embodied experience than just sitting there at your desk, which is mostly your head and very little your body. So I think it's an intriguing idea. And I think another tip that I now think of, which also comes from the work of Dr. Alison Harvey, when individuals come up to me after sort of public events or they see me at the airport, they'll say, look, every night, for some strange reason, at 2:45 a.m., I wake up, and it happens 3 or 4 nights a week. My first question to them is, how do you know it's 2:45? And they say, well, I look at the clock or I look at my phone. Best piece of advice next, remove all clock faces from the bedroom. No matter how bad your sleep is going to be that night, knowing what time it is only going to make matters worse. It is not going to make matters any better. And that can create an anxiety trigger that you think, it's 2:45. And then you're tossing and turning, you look back at the clock and now it's 3:14 a.m. And you think, I've got to be awake at 6. I've got that big meeting. And now it's 5:20. Don't do that to yourself. And even though I don't typically struggle with sleep, I have no clock faces in my bedroom. The phone that I use to help do the guided meditation is an old phone, and it has only Wi-Fi connectivity and nothing else on it. And I will only hit play, and then I will never turn it around. I will not look at the clock face. Just doesn't help me.
Another incentive for keeping the phone out of the room, if one can. I understand there are reasons when one would want the phone in the room if, it's potentially signaling an emergency.
Well, I think it's a very important point, and we've done some work in this area too. What that phone does is create a low level of anxiety. It's what we call anticipatory anxiety. One of the mechanisms separate from that, well, it's related to that. If you look at teen phone use, one of the reasons that they don't sleep very well at night is that they're constantly checking their phones because of FOMO, of fear of missing out. What has gone on as I've been asleep? And it's stunning the data. But for most adults, the other reason I don't like advocating for phone use, when your alarm goes off in the morning, what is the first thing that you do as you're in bed? You swipe right or you unlock your phone and you instantly start checking social media, emails, text messages. And this tsunami of stress and anxiety just floods over you. It hits you like this wall of anxiety. And I bring this up because it again trains your brain for expectation of that. Anticipatory anxiety has a consequence on your sleep, and everyone knows this. Let's say that you've booked an early morning flight and you've got to wake up at 5 a.m. when normally you wake up at 7 a.m. Two things will usually happen. First, you know that you're just not going to sleep as deeply that night because you're on edge. And this is for an interview or it's for a critical, this is a non-negotiable trip that has to happen. You've got to wake up. The second thing is that when you are expecting that wave of sort of a need to wake up, and maybe it's just I'm expecting the phone again, you will wake up just a few minutes before your alarm. It's stunning how many people will say, I had this big flight the next day, and you almost know I'm going to wake up 2 minutes before my alarm goes off. Why? Because your brain has stayed in this shallow state of anticipatory anxiety, and you don't get as much deep sleep. And we've now demonstrated that. We know this. When you have that low level of anxiety, the depth of your deep sleep is not as deep. You don't get the good. So again, not to be trying to dictate what people do, just be aware that when you do create that behavior and that regiment, it becomes almost like a knee-jerk, sort of trained habitual response.